Hello, this is the retake ticket for learning target B using congruent triangles to prove that parts of those triangles are in fact congruent. Number one, we first want to start with some given information. I like to immediately go to my triangle picture and mark the things that I know. It says that AC is congruent to AB, so I'll put a congruent mark on there, and I will just call that my side 1 and side 1. Okay. Teachers have different ways of labeling and marking things. I like to put an S on there so I know that that's a side, and I'm going to use some form of a side to prove the triangles are congruent. The next thing I see is this word bisects. That means to cut in half. And so I've got CAB, which is this angle up here, and it is cut in half. And so I've got two congruent marks there that I can set up, and I can call those angle 1 and angle 1. Now, before I set off into proof, I want to find that third thing. We always need three things, and I know that this middle part is going to be reflexive, and so I can call that my side 2. That's both part of the triangle on the left, triangle ADC, and part of the triangle on the right. Now, of course, this is a C-level question, and you've got some hints down below that we are going to place into the correct statements and justifications, or statements and reasons. I know my first one will always be given, so I'm going to place that one in the first spot. And of course, we want to copy in everything that we were told right there. So I'll shrink that down, and we will fill that in for number 1. Now, for your second and third steps, you have a couple of different options. You can go right for the reflexive side, which is going to be AD, congruent to itself, AD. So we can put that one in for number 2, and we know that that is reflexive, so I will put that in as my justification or my reason. But you could also have gone to our angle 1 and angle 1 there. And so because we've got too much going on at the letter A, I'm going to have to use 3 letters. And of course, those 3 letters are represented here. CAD is congruent to BAD. And we're always using 3 letters whenever there's more than one angle at a vertex. And I just like to remind you that you trace the angle. So if we're looking for this angle up here, you start away, trace to it, and then trace away. Okay, that's one side, and then the other side would be trace to it, trace away. All right. So we have enough information to prove that the triangles are congruent now, and that's always the first step when we're dealing with CPCTC. So I will then go down and I look at my triangles. Of course, it's already written for us, but I do want to match up the correct angle marks. And so I look here, if I start with A, I go down to D, and then over to C. In my second triangle, I will start at A, and then I will go down to D, and then over to B. Oh, we didn't do the definition of bisector. It goes there because we knew that those were bisected. And I know that these two triangles are congruent because of side, angle, side. Side, angle, and then the side, the angles in between. And then finally, our last statement is going to be angle C congruent to angle B. And the reason I know that those two things are congruent is what the name of the learning target is, CPCTC. Corresponding parts in congruent triangles are congruent. Another way to think of that is an if-then statement that says that if the triangles are congruent, then the parts of those triangles are congruent. And C and B are corresponding parts. Okay? That's this here and this here. And you can see how they actually correspond in the statement. Here's C, the third letter, and here's B, the third letter. So those two match up there. We can use CPCTC to prove that they are congruent. If you flip the page over, you'll see example 2. Take you through this one is a little bit different, has some different givens, and now we are going to again start by marking the triangle with what we know. Okay. We know that angle B is congruent to angle E. All right, that has been given to us right away off the bat. We know that C is the midpoint of BE. So if I highlight this entire segment right here, BE all the way down, we know that C is right in the middle, thus making these two segments here and here congruent. So I'll mark this as my angle 1 and my angle 1 here. Here's side 1 and side 1 there. And the last piece then, of course, is the one that we run into quite often. Vertical angles in the middle. I'm going to mark those with a double congruent mark because they are different than the other angles that I have marked. And this is angle 2 and angle 2. All right, so we're making a plan for what our proof is going to be. I know that my first step has got to be to prove that triangles are congruent. And I'm going to use angle, side, angle. The S is between the two A's, and therefore I want to use angle, side, angle. Now it's just a matter of placing the correct statements in the order. Remember, your first goal is to prove that triangles are congruent. So we need to show angle 1, angle 2, and side 1 are all congruent. Well, in our given statement, we are told that BE are congruent and that C is the midpoint of BE. So we can put those in there. That, of course, is our given. And we can check off angle 1. All right, we've got angle 1 in our proof. Now, again, step 2 and step 3, you can switch them around if you'd like. You can go get the vertical angles at this point, or you can use the definition of midpoint to show that you've got side 1's congruent. I'm going to go ahead and use the definition of midpoint. We knew that C was in the middle, which tells us that BC and CE must be congruent. Okay, that's what it means to be in the middle, is you split them into congruent parts. The other thing we need to show is the vertical angles. Again, I've got too much going on at angle C. I need to use 3 letters. So I'm going to look over here in my list. Obviously, it's not A and D. That's what we're trying to prove at the very end. So we're going to use these 2 angle marks. Angle ACB congruent to angle DCE. Again, start away, go towards the vertex, and then go away. Those are vertical angles. And now I've got my side 1, which I proved with the midpoint, and I've got my angle 2, which I proved with vertical angles. I've got everything in my picture checked off that we need. I now can say the triangles are congruent. So I will again carefully, you can label the first one however you'd like, call it A, B, C. The difference is, or the point though, is that we need to make sure that we use the correct second. So what matches up with A? In this picture it's going to be D. What goes up with B? Vice versa down here is E. And then of course C is in the middle on both of them there. So we've got those 2 congruent triangles. I knew that those were congruent by angle, side, angle. And the very last statement then, once you've proven the triangles are congruent, we know all the parts in the triangle must be congruent. So angle A is congruent to angle D by this if-then statement, otherwise known as CP-CTC. Corresponding parts in congruent triangles are congruent. And remember, we can think about that as an if-then statement. If the triangles are congruent, then the corresponding parts are congruent.